Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour à chacune et chacun d'entre vous.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to each and every one of you. We'd like to thank Jacques Attali and the Mayor of Le Havre, Edouard Philippe, for their invitation. For 3 days now, if I understand well, you have been debating with the European French stakeholders, but also stakeholders from other areas of the world, and you have been looking at the flaws of our economy, and you have been, thinking about the new economy that needs to be built, and all the stakeholders, and many stakeholders here, with their own projects and companies, have demonstrated that it's possible. You have taken the risk of inviting a European Commissioner, and at this time of the debate, probably to give you an insight, which I believe is not only useful but also necessary, into the European dimension. And ladies and gentlemen, a European Commissioner is not just an apatride in Brussels. We are political people, and I would like to claim that, I am first of all a political representative. I'm French, but I'm fully committed in the construction of the European general interests. So in that context, please let me tell you about what we do to support this new economy, which would foster solidarity and which would be more positive. A positive economy, as is the title of this forum. When I came to Brussels 3 years ago as a European Commissioner, when I left the French government and French politics, my aim was to really change the economic line of the European project. And I wanted us to break away from the liberal vision of our economy, which had been encouraged for 30 years by left-wing and right-wing people, both in France and in Europe. And I wanted us to go back to this competitiveness market. And for 3 years, I've been acting and striving for this objective at my own level as a commissioner who is in charge of the internal market and services. Now, I'm deeply convinced about what I do, and this is because of the crisis, notably. We went through this financial crisis. Last Thursday was the 5th anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers. So this crisis came from the United States and actually plagued the European financial system, which already had its own flaws as well, right? And it aggravated our debt and, of course, had the political human consequences that we know, and they're not behind us, they're rather in front of us, right? So we won't be able to step out of this crisis in the same way as we actually stepped in it. We shouldn't. Growth should be a different type of growth, and we need to strive for a different type of growth. It has to be more sober, more connected as well, and it should be low carbon or decarbonated. So this is the third industrial revolution that we are experiencing now. And as citizens and stakeholders, now the choice is between being passive about it, suffering from these changes, or if we want to be active about it and if we want to guide those changes. I am a European citizen and still a patriot, but I think that we really need to make sure that we are active. And this is the reason why I decided to go back to Brussels. I wanted to participate in this change. And my first take-home message for you is, please make sure that you are all European. Of course, you can still be attached to your identity, to your country, whatever it is, but the first level of international cooperation is obviously cooperation between European countries who for 60 years have been living together. We chose to live together at the end of the Second World War, and we feel like working together. Jean Monnet, Robert Schuman, and others demonstrated that it was not just about feeling like working together, acting together, but if we wanted to be sustainable in our actions, it had to be in our best interest to do that all together. Remember when we started with the single market back in the 1950s, in 1957, the economy really should be here to consolidate a political will. So, in order to invent and build this new change in economy, well, we really need this European space. It's been there for 60 years. It's been built step by step, based on the pooling of our resources, and we started putting an end to unloyal competition as well, thanks to this project. Now, before I really tell you in practical terms about what I do and also your questions, if you have some, I would like to first say that in order to build a positive economy, a new economy, a new and more humanistic economy, acting in solidarity, in France, we have set up 4 pillars, which are also prerequisites at the same time. And without them, from my point of view, whatever efforts we contribute or you contribute will not bear the fruit that they should bear. So, first of all, the single market. At the scale of a whole continent, we have been able to develop a single market with 500 million consumers and citizens and 22 million companies, based on rules and standards pertaining to working conditions, standards of living, pollution, so forth and so on. So we have tried to avoid a war of standards and unloyal competition. Of course, we're not here to suppress competition. Competition is part and parcel of our life in universities, in the streets of Le Havre, but it has to be fair competition and loyal. So, we want to make a difference in the world. This is also the reason why we're here. Whether you're in Washington, Rio, or Beijing, today we are respected not because of our defense policy or whatever. It's because of the single market, because they need our market and we need theirs. So we need to further develop this market in a homogeneous way for the service of SMEs, citizens and consumers, who sometimes have the feeling, and rightly so, that this market was not for them or for bigger, but for bigger people and companies. Now, for 3.5 years, I've been working and striving to correct this, because it was a fair feeling that they had. It was right. So first of all, we want to develop a single market that would allow people to be more empowered, companies and citizens. In the Eurozone now, because we have 18 countries now sharing the single currency, we should stop and move away from competition between our monetary, budgetary policies or tax policies. It's not possible to have a single currency but not a single economy. So this is a risk that was already highlighted by Jacques Delors. He was the first to do so. And the crisis, which is not over yet, almost led to a full collapse of everything. We saw this with Greece. If there's a problem with one bank in a country, well, it can impact all the other countries, all the other banks in Europe. And if there is a problem of management in one country, problem of governance in one country, well, then it can have a consequence on the others. So we have to govern this Eurozone in a different way, in a more consistent way, in a more democratic way as well. This is also what I do with the banking union, which is a revolution in the euro, because the 6,000 banks are now going to be supervised and managed jointly. So this was the second pillar, a prerequisite for the Eurozone. The third one now is, within the framework of this European Union, we need to manage our public finances at all levels in a responsible way. We need to stop borrowing stealing money from our kids. I'm not only talking about the environment, I'm talking also about money, because sometimes people actually take loans, but of course we have to fund our future with that. Research, innovation, but we should stop borrowing from our kids to pay for the way we operate today. It's not responsible, it's not fair. Fourth pillar, I'm more directly in charge of this one, is about making sure that we have sound financial markets, not based on lies or sand. So for 3.5 years, I've worked for the development of a regulatory framework, including 28 regulation laws which have been presented, and most of them voted and will be implemented by the 1st of January 2014. No financial market or product will escape the public regulation. No. This is something that we owe to the taxpayers and to the citizens. Why do I do all this? Obviously, these financial markets are needed. We have banks funding 75% of the European economy. In the US, they only fund 25% of the economy. But in Europe, we have banks which fund 75% of the European economy, well, they should be working for the best interest of the economy, not for themselves. In Arte, not long ago, I was saying that some people thought that they had full powers, because they did. They did have full powers thanks to deregulation systems. So we have fully changed this culture of deregulation, and we have built this fourth pillar. So these, as I said, are prerequisites. And this is not something that's going to happen in a vague future. It's something that is already there, and we are implementing it now. And of course, I understand that people were angry and worried, because when you build something, it's not, always very attractive when we talk about this. But we are really consolidating the single market. We are really reinforcing the governance of the Eurozone. And our national funds will be better managed. We have to make all efforts to make sure that we don't borrow from future generations. And financial regulation. So these are the four pillars that we have built, and based on them, we can now imagine what type of paradigm change we can strive for. And this is the reason, as I said, why I decided to go and work in Brussels. At the entrance to this room, there is now a display summarizing everything that I do now at the level of the European Commission. I would like to remind you about the fact that we are 28 commissioners, and collectively we are here to not decide, but to suggest laws. The only area where we can actually decide is competition. Otherwise, we can only make proposals of green books and regulations and laws. And what we do is suggest them to the politicians, because sometimes they forget to actually fulfill their responsibilities, if I listen to some of our current ministers or past ministers. So there are going to be elections, European elections at the Commission, and their role is at least as important as national ministries and senators. So these are the two chambers, the Chamber of States and the Chamber of Citizens, and I have to go through those two chambers so that the laws that I suggest them become actual laws for the 28 countries of the EU. Now, most of these laws, which have been developed over the past 3 years, are now being more and more implemented, and this is a true revolution. So, some of these laws can sometimes be reactive, preventive, or punitive. There can be penalties implemented in front of certain behaviors. Some of these people who act wrongly on the markets could go to prison and would deserve it if they do. And As I said, these regulations are preventative, active, and punitive. And we now want to have something more reactive, and this is what we've been striving for. Based on two parallel agendas here that support each other. We have worked a lot on the basis of the internal market, where we want to make sure that there is room for crowdfunding, positive economy, social entrepreneurship, and we have, together with my colleagues, identified some 50 areas for improvement where we can consolidate the market, where we can actually support you more there. Talking about European patents, which is also part and parcel of a new economy, making sure that you protect your innovations, have proper remuneration for innovators, creators. European patents will be 35 years old. And now it's going to cost only 5,000 euros and not 35, because before you had this obligation to translate into all the languages of the EU. Now you won't have that anymore, and so that will be less costly. There will be the simplification of public procurement rules, and this is something that has been adopted by the Parliament and the Council in order to drastically reduce the administrative constraints imposed on the SMEs when they participate in a call for tender, whatever call for tender we're talking about. So talking about a positive economy, talking about social entrepreneurship, we have been able to secure this system and make sure that people, if they want to favor a company that acts for social integration, that acts for environmental issues or innovation, they will be able not to base their choice only on the lowest price, but also on the best quality from that respect. And also another item that we've been working on is the electronic signature system. And so this is key if we want to be able to develop e-invoicing and the digitalization of public procurement systems. Public procurement systems in Europe represent 80% of the GDP, 18% of the European GDP as defined today. So if you are able to digitalize all the system, you will save 80 billion euros a year. And this is something that we will be able to achieve within 5 years. And this is good saving, right? In 5 years' time. So this is just an overview of some of our proposals. Of course, I've read Jacques Attali's book, and I've read the work that has been led by the working group on a positive economy, and we have found 20 points of convergence between your proposals and the 45 proposals that have been made at European level. Proposals that have been already made at European level. So based on these 45 proposals and based on my own agenda, and I've said this to Jacques Attali, I'm ready to start getting down to work, telling you why this is possible or not. But anyway, we will look at these proposals in a constructive way, because I said it from scratch, we will not step out of this crisis in the same way as we've stepped in it. And growth, and I say this in a quite prudent way, but I believe that growth can no longer be the growth that we've had before for 20 or 30 years. Growth has to be more sober and more inclusive as well. Together with my staffs, we have defined those areas of convergence between the two agendas, and we have also identified the areas where Europe can act as a lever that will serve a positive economy. For example, extra financial reporting, those obligations that we impose on banks, for example, they have to say how many staffs they have, how much tax they pay, how they are supported from other European countries. European banks will have this new obligation from the 1st of January next year, and we will have comparable systems for companies. We'll talk about the tax base, the fight against tax paradise, I could actually quote all the different proposals by Jacques Attali. Of course, taxes is a difficult subject because this is a subject that we have to work on in a unanimous way. So if one minister doesn't agree, he can block all the others. And also, we have regulated banks and everything, so they're not very happy about that. But I could go on like that for a long time. So now let's look at the connection that exists between those two types of regulations: reactive regulation, proactive regulation. And I have, within this precise framework, started a public debate on long-term economy and investment on the long term, and how we can use tax regulations, accounting rules, administrative rules, how we can use corporate governance also to encourage long-term funding. And now we are mobilized to complete this regulative agenda and to start all the initiatives that are needed for a long-term investment, including the ecological transition, the issue around dependency, communication, infrastructure, and research. All this is part and parcel of this because, of course, they need long-term investment and funding. Now, let me conclude with the same subject as the one I started with. We can do a lot at local level. I've been chairing a regional council for a long time, and I can say this. There's a lot you can do at local level, at national level with government policies, but what we do has more clout and is more likely to be successful if we do it within the single market, because, of course, it gives more synergies to Europe internally, but it also serves as an example at international and global level, because, of course, we are all living now in a globalized world where nothing is free. Nobody is waiting for us anymore. And so we can only count on ourselves to build our future. This is a table I would like to show because I show it very often, and this will be my conclusion. It shows why we should be European. It's not an option. It's a vital necessity. Whilst remaining patriots and attached to our identities once again. But these are the columns showing which are going to be the 10 top countries in the next 50 years. Today, you have 4 European countries which are among the top 10. 4 out of 28. The UK, Germany, Italy, and France. And every 10 years, and this is a metric that was developed by the Prime Minister in the UK, so I guess it's all correct and precise. And every 10 years, there's one of the 4 countries of Europe which is stepping out of the top 10. And in 2050, you don't have one single European country on the top 10. And I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to be a reality. I don't want us to be passive about it and suffer our decline and fate. And the only way we can do that today, in today's world, if we want to change the model that we have, if we want to preserve what we like in the previous model, for example, the social dimension, the only way we can do that is by being Europeans. So this was my take-home message for you. Thank you for your attention.